Here's Esther Kim Varet, who is the founder of Various Small Fires, a gallery established in 2012 with locations in Los Angeles, California, and Seoul, South Korea. Various Small Fires, or VSF, focuses primarily on emerging and established American artists, in particular those with practices relating to social justice, climate activism, identity politics, and alternative modalities of visual art production and consumption. So I'm so happy to connect Esther Kim Varet with our department, and I feel like there's a lot of resonances between the practices that I see going on at the University of Hawaiʻi, Manoa, and Esther's work. So without further ado, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Maika. It's really nice to be here. My family has a home in Kona, and my brother lives in Kona, so Hawaii, and my sister-in-law went to the University of Hawaiʻi. So I feel a lot of kind of connections to not only this university, but also Hawaii in general. And so I don't know, maybe we should start by throwing up a few slides, and I can talk a little bit about my journey to being a gallerist, a commercial gallerist. I started off, I don't know, should we throw something up?
Yeah, let me put up this slide. Can people see that okay? Is that working for you?
So these are the two spaces that we have. The first one on the left is Various Small Fires in Los Angeles. It's in Hollywood. Hollywood, I would say, is one of the kind of most main destinations for contemporary art in Los Angeles right now. It's a building that was designed by Johnston and Mark Lee, who have done most recently the UCLA grad studios that Mario Levin funded. They also did the Manila Drawing Center, the new museum in Houston, and they were the last co-directors of the Chicago Architecture Biennial. They're very interesting architects, and we kind of got to work with them very early on in their career. And then the space on the right is Various Small Fires in Seoul, South Korea, where we opened about 3 years ago with a 2-person show of Billy Al Bankston and Ed Ruscha, two California legends and longtime friends. And it was a show about their 50-year friendship together. They'd done a show 50 years prior together as a 2-person show, and they basically made new works that kind of relived that original exhibition for this kind of kickoff in Seoul. And as many of you guys might know, Seoul in the last few years, and especially in the last year, has gained a lot of momentum. There are a lot of huge galleries that have moved to Seoul or are opening branches in Seoul, mostly because of the anticipation that Hong Kong will no longer be the kind of cultural center that it was in Asia. Now that's shifting, and the kind of sights are set on Seoul. So Frieze, the art fair, is opening their first iteration in September, and I think our timing was really great. I mean, also for me, it was always natural because I am Korean American, and we have roots in Korea, both with family ties and friends. So it made a lot of sense. I don't know if you want to go to the next slide. Oh, this is our current show. This is Ashley Bickerton. I think this is kind of an interesting kind of work to put in here. A lot of you guys might know, or maybe you were too young, but was one of the biggest artists in the 80s, and had made a lot of works at that time about corporations and consumerism, and then Ashley left New York and moved to Bali. And he is an avid surfer, as maybe some of you are on this Zoom. And he spent the last 2 or 3 years collecting debris on the beaches. things that would wash ashore. So really all the things that are kind of this byproduct of advanced capitalism that he, in the 80s, he was kind of anticipating and then now is living out in a country like Bali. And it's just kind of interesting as this kind of conversation of global warming goes and of one's carbon footprint and how different countries, there's an unequal kind of impact on various countries. I mean, I think this is a really, like, I don't know, it's a kind of swan song of sorts in my mind of the kind of late capitalist era that we're in now. If you look at the, so as Maika was saying, a lot of these conversations, you know, I don't think Ashley Bickerton is necessarily one that is naturally affiliated with the conversation around ecology, but because, and when these this is a partnership show that we did with Lehman Lopin Gallery in New York, and they showed a very similar body of work earlier this year. And I definitely think that, like, because our program is so heavily invested and we have a reputation of being invested in a lot of these investigations of ecology, the arts, you know, the art world's impact on like our carbon impact is also a very interesting one. I mean, if you look, you can't really see it in this slide, but if you look, it's actually a crate, like as a shipping crate, like an art crate, like it's dimensioned like an art crate. And so when we took it out of the actual art crate, it actually looked like another crate was sitting within the art crate. But it's just, anyways. And so, but this show, it's interesting because people are reading this work through kind of the lens of what the gallery's programming concerns are. And so I think we're kind of opening up, even in Ashley's practice, a lot of other conversations that might not have happened were it being shown elsewhere. Sorry, I'm kind of going off on tangents. I could talk about any of these slides forever.
It's great. I'm really interested in the way that, I mean, I've known you for a while, Esther, and seen you through various lives, maybe thinking of you initially more as a scholar, right? At Columbia and studying within the PhD program there, and transitioning to doing this kind of very, I don't know if I'd say like activist gallerist work, but you certainly have a program with an identity. And I remember some of your earliest presentations as a gallerist, like at Frieze London, some time ago, when you brought in these beautiful lemon trees. And I think for that booth, like they were very moving.
The Harrisons,
within the context of an art fair, and very unusual. I saw it as both risk-taking, right? Because the work itself was not overtly commercial and also involving a certain amount of historical archival work. It was a recreation of a work from the 70s, if I'm
71.
And then
which was the founding year of the Earth Day movement, which is significant.
So anyway, I think it's really interesting the work you're doing, and so like Ashley Bickerton is maybe someone who we might think of in a number of different contexts, but then to kind of transform that like 80s it boy of high capitalism into someone reflecting in this thoughtful way on like post-consumer waste and the state of like the oceans is really, you know, it is a kind of unique frame that you're able to put on this work that is also like a kind of interesting move in a career.
I mean, as Maika, you were saying, like I started off as an artist, which was it was like I was showing one of my artists, Joshua Nathanson, 2 days ago, my artwork from like my high school and college years. And so I started off as an artist, and I actually was an art major when I was in college for most of it. So I went to Yale for my undergrad, very specifically for the art department there.
Was there anyone who really influenced you or like attracted you at that time?
Well, Peter Halley was there when I first entered, and I really like, and actually kind of, you know, Peter works a lot. I mean, his work is a lot about systems and circuit systems and all that stuff. But I actually became much more philosophically interested in systems in general. systems aesthetics from like the 60s and 70s, which is like a totally dorky, like whatever. That's like, I kind of was like, realized I wasn't that great of an artist. But I also, I mean, I know that there are some MFA students here, and people are like, well, why did you stop making art? And I was like, well, first of all, I realized I was much better about talking about it than actually making it. And secondly, I didn't have an insatiable desire to make, which I think that is kind of a defining characteristic of an artist, is that like whether or not you're showing in a gallery or you're showing in your mother's garage, like you have an insatiable desire to make objects. And I just like didn't have that desire. And once I kind of honed in on that, my junior year, I was like, okay, I'm going to actually do this art history major thing, because I was very into a lot of kind of the literature. And then I just kept on going, mostly because I have like, you know, very annoying Korean parents that are like, you can't graduate with an art or art history degree. What are you going to do with your life? And so they're like, you have to at least get a PhD to get it, to like have a safety net, which is a very like Asian, I think, mentality, to be like,
misunderstanding what a PhD is and
what safety
it might provide.
What a PhD was. Right. And they were like, we want to call you Dr. Kim. You know, it's like, as if that would make everything okay that I was going into the art world. But so, you know, a little bit out of like kind of pressure from my family, I basically kept on just going, you know, in the art history direction. And it's funny because it's like when you are like, okay, if only I applied and don't get in anywhere, then I'll be like, fine, I don't have to do it. And then I could just like take another route. But I just like, the doors just kept on opening. So I was just like, okay. And then I just like kept on going in. And then I was like, fast forward 10 years in a PhD program. You know, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing?
I think I was on your committee at one point at Columbia.
You were.
This dissertation that was imminent. But you had also been doing a lot of commercial gallery work. I think initially as part of a collective or a group, and then with your own venture.
I mean, I think the paths of an art historian there are a number of paths, right? Or like getting a PhD, it's like you really only need a PhD if you're going to teach at the university level, or become a specialist maybe at an auction house, or maybe a curator, but you don't even need that to be a curator. I don't know, like, and I was like, well, I don't know if I could like teach at a university level, mostly because I'm not organized. I don't know. I'm not like,
I don't know about that, but you were also doing, I mean, if I can just mention the most ridiculous fact I know about you, you were also sort of running a gallery, and weren't you the inspiration for that like Asian gallerist in Girls?
I was.
I don't know if people have seen the show or if it's just.
Yeah.
But I mean, you were doing things that, you know, had a certain impact, let's say.
Yes. Yeah. And like, I went to Columbia for my PhD, which is like a gnarly place to try to get a PhD, because you're in the city and the temptations of the city are all around you. So it's like trying to like stay on that campus and just be on that campus is so challenging. And so at the same time, yes, I was like running up and down the 1-9 train, like teaching, TAing classes, and then running this gallery space that I started with 2 other friends. And I think I kept on being drawn to the commercial gallery context because I realized I loved researching ideas, but I didn't like researching them forever, like a dissertation. Like I like finding things and then like showing people really quickly like what I found, and then maybe have other people continue the conversation, but then move on to finding another thing. And I think that's been a very attractive format for a gallery.
You worked with some artists early on who were very, I feel like they're very important to you, who maybe didn't fit into the let's write a dissertation about them format. Like you did a lot with, I think, Liz Magic Laser.
Yeah. Liz. Yeah. I mean, we did a lot with Liz. I still think Liz is one of the most important artist of her generation. I will always be such an advocate of her work, and she's still a big part of our program. And I mean, she's on our roster still, and we will probably do another show with her in 2 years. But yeah, I mean, I think that we have a pretty big range of practices. I don't know if you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah, should I be advancing slides? We're on slide 2 here, right?
Oh yeah, so that's the Harrisons. We have a courtyard. So we have 5,000 square feet of exhibition space at this gallery in LA. And this is a back courtyard area. This is actually the artist that you were just mentioning that we showed at Frieze with the lemon tree. So this is the Harrisons, who are considered the founders of the ecological art movement, and they're kind of one of the cornerstones of our program. What you're looking at here is a brine shrimp farm. So we built this, we brought in tons of water from the ocean, from Catalina Island, because that's really the only place you can buy ocean water, interestingly enough. It's like a funny problem to have when you live by the ocean, but you're like, how do I get ocean water? And what it is that each section has different levels of salinity in the water, and the algae that's growing in there blooms at different rates depending on how much salinity is in there. And the brine shrimp that you also throw in there and grow eat the algae, and the algae blooms powered by the sun. So it's the first. This was a piece made at LACMA in 1971. And it was actually considered one of the earliest ecological land art pieces. And it is a self-sustaining kind of system of the sun, and the energy is coming from the sun. And at the very end of the kind of exhibition run and cycle, you are supposed to harvest the shrimp and cook it and give it out to the community. So it's really kind of interesting because they were very early to it's like, you can say color field painting, it's a certain kind of version, it's a certain kind of land art. You could even say
it's prerequisite,
prerequisite, all of that stuff. It's all encapsulated in here, and it's actually the instructions on how to make this. The actual artwork is it looks like a poster, but it's designed off of a popular auto mechanics manual, those manuals from the 60s and 70s of popular mechanics, whatever it is. But it's an instruction thing of how one could make this for themselves, because the Harrisons predicted a future with grave food shortages because of the climate changing. And so these are the earliest works, I think, in America that are known of works about sustainable farming and what is that word? Home farming, and some of the earliest works about climate change, and making proposals for a climate ready future. That are for humans, and these manuals are really designed for anybody, and you use materials that in theory are available to anybody to get, off the shelf materials. The ocean water, I don't know, depends on how far away you live from the ocean, but so yes, this is a good example of
One
that.
thing I love about your space is that you recreated this collaboration with the artist, but it's kind of it's something maybe someone who is doing deep research into the history of art and ecology might have stumbled across, but to create the physical experience of encountering this work and to see the metabolic processes of the system work over time is something that I feel like your gallery is really unique in providing a space to do.
Sure, and especially in a commercial setting, because that's and we were able to successfully sell this work back to LACMA. I was like, you guys hosted this work to start with. And then it was so there, and it was great because it actually, it opened up, actually, so many people were like, what is this? So many historians were like, now remember there's 7 of these. They're different. One is a catfish farm. One is like a worm farm making compost. One is a duck, there are some wild, like really interesting proposals that were all made in the early 70s at different museums, actually. And MoCA, in their land art show in 2012 that Myung did, they remade a hog pasture one with a live hog in it. It's just like, and now people are remembering and being
right,
like,
but you don't learn about this when you're learning about the history of, say, minimalism or of color field painting into the gallery space. I mean, ducks,
I know, and it's one of those things. Like I was, and I was writing about the Harrisons for my dissertation, and I was like, God, I really want to see this. I was like, I really want to make this. I really want this to be a part of the conversation again. And there was a part of me that was really sad because I was like, okay, I'm doing all this research. It's going to go into my dissertation and no one is going to read it. Maybe Maika. Maybe Maika. And my advisor probably won't even read it. I was like,
but it's so moving to see you able to materialize these works and put them in the public dialogue again, to put them in the discourse, to not only, make them, but have them in your space in LA or to have them at Frieze London and have people talk about them because
Yeah. And that piece actually that you saw at Frieze London, we sold to the Whitney, and they have plans in the next few years to remake that orchard in the lobby. So it's like, again, like it really felt like,
which would be beautiful, which was so beautiful.
And they realized, and again, a lot of people didn't see it, but the Walker had remade that piece about 10 years ago. So it's like, it's in the air, but it's like, sometimes you need the commercial world to like re-highlight things.
Yeah, and put them at the forefront because the way these fairs operate, like everyone's there. Like I think I remember Chris Liu in your booth or, whatever.
Yeah.
That's where people are circulating.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll keep on going with slides.
Okay, yeah. Another ecology show that we did, Sean Raspet. This is a lot of ecology work, so I think this is maybe on purpose that Mallory did this. But this is a show that just came down. Sean Raspet, kind of I see as like a torch, someone that is a torchbearer of some of projects that the Harrisons were doing. But I'm very interested in art and ecology practices that are very invested in bringing the artworks out back into the world. So, and they have a lot of practical conclusions, not just about aestheticizing a crisis. I really like these kind of propositions that artists come with to imagine a better future or to imagine a potential answer. Sean Raspet is an artist that is actually working right now as a taste tester at one of those fake meat companies, like those chicken nugget companies that like are making it out of tofu, it's like kind of like the Beyond Meat or Impossible Meat companies. But this work actually, he collaborated with universities to radiate seeds of 52 local plants in the Southern California region. And because of climate and the realities of climate, the 3 to 5 degree rise in climate, the future, he basically accelerated through a process of radiation, what would be a very natural process of selection or evolution. He's like these plants have no chance of evolving fast enough to survive the 5 degree change. And so what he did is he basically, through radiation, accelerated the evolutionary process of a lot of these plants. And so the plants that you see here are new varieties, radiated varieties of local California plants. And so that could potentially have a better chance of withstanding climate change.
Oh my God, it looks so innocuous. And it's like this zombie apocalypse scenario of like California weeds.
Yeah. So that's, so we're kind of like, we are preparing for the zombie apocalypse over here. But I think, again, it's nice for us to have these shows. I mean, we do have, I don't know if you want to go to the next slide. shows. This is Kalita Rawls, a painter that we represent who makes paintings about Black bodies in water and kind of the more Jim Crow era injustices of Black bodies. And it's kind of interesting. When I first did the Kalita studio visit, she was like, yeah, it's interesting whether or not, it depends on whether or not a Black person is looking at these paintings for the first time or like a white person. A white person would be like, oh, look, peaceful swimming or whatever. Black people would be like, shit, are they drowning? It's like a lot of Black people can't swim, you know, and it's that trauma it's that kind of, it's that historical trauma of not having access and having for African Americans to have a totally different relationship with big bodies of water that she wanted us to start thinking about again. And so that was last year. And actually one of the paintings is about her daughter on the left. So she uses a lot of friends and family in these. And Kalita right now also has a show up at Lehman Mopin in New York. And that's her first show there. And I don't know if you want to go to the next slide.
Oh, yeah.
This is actually our soul space, inside our soul space. I don't know if you know Gina Beaver's work, but Gina spends most of her research life on Instagram and social media and going down wormholes of different trends. You know, she focused, for example, she's done, you know, she did a trend on nail art, and then she did a trend on like food hybrids, you know, it's like, and I think for Gina, again, it's like, it's kind of interesting that these are the slides that Mallory chose, because Gina is very much not necessarily about like social activism, but is really about kind of visual trauma or like an era of visual trauma, or like maybe the inverse of that is like visual apathy towards images or whatever it is. Like she's very interested in how our consumption of the digital world then changes our relationship with objects in the real world, and for her as a painter changes her own relationships to objects that she makes. But there, you know, all three of these bodies of work, I do feel like there is a kind of social commentary element that is a little bit more than a pretty landscape picture. But I mean, not to say that a pretty landscape picture can't be like radical in its own way, but you know, I think that I guess for me, because I came from an art historical background and I came from a very specific, I mean, Maika and I came from a very similar background of like neo-Marxist thinking, maybe in art history, I knew that sooner or later, and also, you know, my job as PhD candidate, as was Maika's, was to rewrite art history. As an art historian, your task is to rewrite a part of art history that can be renegotiated or should be renegotiated. And I really do feel like that is always at the back of my mind. And I do think of artists of my younger generation, like, I mean, my generation and a generation younger than me, like, and also my kids' generation. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I'm like, this climate thing is not going to go away. This is going to define even how art history is rewritten on an academic, you know, on the college level or university level. Like, this has to be the way, or like museums are going to have to renegotiate this history and look at it through a totally, you know, look backwards again through this lens, because it is going to be so relevant topically for these other generations. And we kind of wanted to position ourselves to be a part of that rewriting and to start the process of that rewriting. And so, yes.
I'm going to keep on going because I want to get to the part where people can ask questions. And I think we have a lot of, just from the chat, engagement with the work and the specific artists you're working with. And I'm also I want to say so grateful to be able to show that, galleries and gallery programs can be fueled by this kind of passion and engagement with contemporary issues like climate change, and create real dialogues with their programs around these issues in a way, because I think that's maybe something that is a little more subtle than identifying a single artist whose work is, politically engaged, or even an academic or thinker, that there are these ways that entrepreneurs like yourself are using a business model to create these very rich dialogues around social issues in a way that I find very inspiring, and intergenerational too, in the way that your gallery program puts together some of these thinkers. Okay, another slide.
Okay. Well, this is Jessie Homer French, another artist that you should look into if you have a chance. She's in her 80s. Really beautiful works, but a lot of works about kind of life cycles and human destruction, life cycles, but like very kind of, like they're not like passionate speeches about they're very like kind of cold and factual, which I think is actually a very interesting way to think about. Anyways, another artist, you'll see this artist actually pretty soon. She is going to be in the Venice Biennale coming up. So you're going to start seeing her work a lot more, maybe she's already very popular, even though she doesn't really know it because she's 81 and is a hermit, but also very interesting artist.
And we're putting everyone's names in the chat, by the way.
Yeah. Okay.
Some people,
but like you were saying, like beautiful paintings, but kind of have this like weird, like a weirdness to it.
Okay, I think we have all install shots, so I'm gonna go.
Yeah, you could just skip through these. This is not.
That was it. That's the last one.
This is a collaboration that we did with Salon 94 in New York, and this is a page where we just kind of put. I actually don't represent Elizabeth Neal, so I don't really have that much to say about like how she fits into our program. She's fit into our program mostly because we collaborated with Salon 94 and they chose to bring her in, and we chose to collaborate with them to introduce Elizabeth's work to Korea. But we do a lot of collaborations.
Something nice about your location, right? Because you're in LA and Seoul, so you can work with a lot of New York and European galleries.
Yeah. It actually was a thing that was kicked off during the pandemic because Seoul never closed. Nothing really shut down the same way that it did in the States, and so I don't know if you guys want to go down memory lane of what it was like a year ago, but everybody was like freaking out because all the gallerists that I was friends with in New York were freaking out because they had to close their galleries and nobody knew what was going to happen and all that stuff. And so I was basically like, listen, like I have a gallery in Korea that's just running. I mean, LA was closed too. I was like, why don't we take some of the shows that you were going to do that you're not able to do and start showing them in Korea? And so we started squeezing collaborative shows in between whatever was already programmed for us.
So you were doing a lot during the pandemic there.
We were very busy, yeah. And continue to be, but yeah, so that was one.
I did promise and want to give people time for questions.
Sure.
I saw a lot of just kind of factual questions in the chat that we're trying to answer about the names of individual artists. But did people have questions they want to pop up and ask? I know Gay had a comment about Ashley Bickerton. I don't know if you want to make that into a question or something. Oh, yay. Jamie's here. Okay. Jamie, you can just stop video yourself and talk directly. I would love for you guys to chat. This is Jamie Hamilton Ferris, one of our professors of history here, who just curated a great show on climate change and the ocean.
Thanks so much, Esther. I tried to explain in the chat that let's see, going back to my chat here. I'm interested in what you were saying about bringing environmentalism and climate awareness into art history and the art world. And I especially appreciate you parsing the difference between aestheticizing the crisis and setting propositions for a better future. And I think your viewers probably appreciate that, but I wanted you to maybe say a little bit more about how the buyers might respond to that difference, or if they see that difference at all in the way that they're thinking about the pieces.
I will say that most buyers, most collectors are not interested in conversations about the environment unless it's a painting. It's like, unless it's like a nice looking painting, you know? And I think that's why, for example, someone like Jessie Hammer French does very well on the market, because it's an attractive painting and you kind of understand very quickly. It's almost like how quickly, you know, the challenge that environmental art has is that the format of speaking science is not compatible most of the time with aesthetics. It's like, it's really hard to make a graph sexy, you know. It's like, it's really hard to like make statistics sexy, you know. It's like visually sexy, like it's very hard. And there are and I think some of the kind of a lot of the kind of education of the public about what is happening, or about a certain kind of crisis, or about mobilizing, those things are very difficult to find. I mean, again, it's like, for me, like I gravitate towards artists like the Harrisons versus like, who's another artist that you feel like aestheticizes the environment, that like Doug Aiken. I feel like Doug Aiken's a perfect. Yeah. Like I'm less interested in these kind of shiny objects about the environment and much more interested in plants or brine shrimp farms, or like whatever it is that is like, this is an answer. Like, this is like something that can go back into the world and function and like continue to live outside. Like the gallery is just a platform to highlight, but right. It isn't.
I think I find it really fascinating that your personal investment is in the way that you want to talk about the artwork is probably different than what you say when you're in a gallery situation in Art Basel or something like that, because the buyers aren't necessarily interested in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the buyers are much more interested in, well, this work was shown at this museum, or is in this acquisition, you know, is in this museum collection or that museum collection.
But you also sell, if I can interject, to museums that maybe aren't actually engaged by this content directly in these kind of process-oriented works.
Right, and they tend to be more of our clients. And when I say like clients, it doesn't really stop at like individuals that live down the street trying to decorate their house. Like, it's really people that have foundations and people that are trying to create foundations dedicated. There are individuals that are trying to create foundations dedicated to conversations around art and ecology. Museums are trying to catch up right now to fill in works in their collection that have that conversational component. And for me, it's a win-win, because we get to get these works. I mean, in an art fair context, for example, is that we get to get these works in front of a lot of different kinds of people, and we get to kind of bend people's ideas of what is viable or what is attractive. And I do think that it's important that ecological artworks are sellable, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, it is important, whether or not it's to the museum or whatever. Like I think that there's a way that artworks need to travel from one place to another, and that is often through the sale or through a gift or through something. You know, it's like, and selling something is just one way of moving an object from one place to another, from one house to another. And I think that the saleability is actually, whether or not it's a painting or a concept, like even with the Harrisons, that piece, I wanted to remake that. And I had asked Newton Harrison, I was like, okay, I want to remake this, but how do I make it? He was like, well, I do have these drawings that nobody's ever seen. And I'm like, what? You have drawings? And it's like, yeah. And what I did is basically, he made 7 beautiful drawings with instructions on them from the early, like 71. And I framed them and put it up in this room, actually, alongside the works that were made. So it's like, you're able to make the visual connection that like, oh, I can just buy this drawing, which holds the rights to producing that, you know, and you have to like sometimes make a connection for people to consume it, whether or not, again, and then the works that we have been selling, we didn't sell like that giant, I'm not like sending that weird water bath of brine shrimp to LACMA. Like I'm like, they're buying that drawing, which holds the rights to reproduce it. And I had to like figure out how to package that for them. Which anyways.
We have some really great questions going on with Wendy and Mari about the saleability of artwork, and but I want to give Haley Ross a chance to jump in. She's asking about kind of like a personal struggle as a studio art major. If you want to jump up.
Hi. Yeah, I'll just read it. So I get a little nervous. I might forget. But I just said, I feel like I'm in a similar kind of situation as you were. I'm a studio art major, but I find myself sometimes struggling to make art unless it's like an assignment. But do you think that changing your major to art history allowed you to take like the stress off of creating art and helped you like excel in finding yourself and your connection to art, whether it being creating art or just associated in the art industry?
Yeah, I mean, that struggle to make something is, and I understand your question. Like you're like, oh, if I have an assignment, I like have a direction. Like I have to follow the assignment. So like I have a map. But like the question is, if you didn't have the assignment, would you still make that thing? You know, and for me, I was like very similarly. I was like, I wouldn't make the thing. I don't think I would make anything if I wasn't given an assignment. You know, it's like. And once I realized that, I was like, well, and then you have to ask yourself a series of questions, like, what are your strengths? Like, I always loved writing, and I felt like I could paint a picture by writing, you know, I like curating, you know, it's like, I like putting things, like I was like, oh, I have an idea for a show or whatever. I have an idea for something and I feel like I know how to put that together. Like, and I like the aspect of producing it. I like making the calls and organizing it and it was like a personality thing. And I was like, oh, well, this is like, obviously the art world, the gallery world is something that I understand how to do. Like, I feel like it fits my personality. But I mean, I don't know how to exactly answer your question because I know that feeling of being stuck. There's like really no easy answer to get out of it. But I do think asking yourself, like, if I were to just make, like, if you're like, I'm going to be an artist, like I'm committed to being an artist, like, then just make things, you know, just like be an excessive maker of things. And like, there'll be things that work and things that don't work. And at least you have the choice, you know, as opposed to getting stuck and immobilized and not making anything, then nobody like knows whether or not you're an artist. It's like if you're not making anything. I do think that it's like, it's that making component that is really, I mean, I have artists that are legitimately like they are artists, but they don't know, they have the same problems too of like not being able to know when to start making. I'm not sure if I answered your question. I don't know if I can answer that question, but
it's just nice to get feedback and like insight about about it.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Art history is like maybe not like I have a friend that Maika, you know Don. Chan, who is like now a writer. She's a writer at Art Forum, and but she was a studio art major, and then like took a beat for a long time and became like cognitive science major. You know, she like was like, okay, I don't want to make art anymore. I'm gonna like study cognitive science, and graduated with that, and then like became an art writer in New York. You know, it's like, I think if you love art, like you'll find ways to continuously come back to it. And if you don't love it anymore, then don't do it. You know, there are a lot of other things to do in life. Like it's just one sector. It's not like the end of, you know, it's like, it's actually a very tiny sector of the world. And most people don't really get what you're doing anyway. So it's like, not really.
Thank you. Thank you.
Korean mom, tough love with the art business thing there. I remember driving around with you in LA, and it was one of those like LA phone calls that you make on your car, and you were just like so good at dealing with just like some little thing that came up with Liz or something like that, and I was like, oh my god, she's gonna do this. This is it. Like this is the thing. Just like, yeah, like what are you really, really good at? Maybe is another question.
Yeah.
Like naturally good at. You're like, I don't know. But I don't know, it just seemed clear. I feel so bad because we've gone over time, but there are like so many other questions, and just like there's so much engagement with this material and this topic. And I feel like you've given us just a really rich presentation, because there are all these artists that people can look up and get interested in. But then there's also this kind of these like larger existential questions about like what is a life, and what, you know, what do we do with passions, or like how are businesses organized in relation to artwork and activism. So I don't want to keep you for longer than we promised, and I know people have to go to classes, but I just like really, oh no, what are the challenges of being a curator? I think we don't have time. I think we can't go there, but maybe we can get Esther back another time.
I mean, you guys had so many good questions. I am sorry that I maybe overspoke.
I think I scheduled these a little bit too short. If I really think about it, 45 minutes is maybe not enough time to like go into all of this stuff, because you really only had like 10 slides and presented. It was amazing. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
To like, please come again.
Yes.
I know Esther's in Hawaii from time to time, so we can lure her back before like too long. And do check out the program at VSF in LA and Seoul, and keep an eye on Seoul. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks guys. All right, have a good day.